In the bustling town of Abeokuta, there was a famous church called Fire of Glory Ministries. It was led by Pastor Femi Olowokere, a man with a big smile and a loud voice that could make the church roof shake when he preached. People admired him. Women said, "Ah, this man, he's truly a servant of God, oh." And men respected him because he always spoke about holiness and doing the right thing. But Pastor Femi had a secret, a very big secret. At home, he was married to Mama Tolu, a kind and humble woman who loved cooking jollof rice for church events. They had 3 children, and people thought their family was perfect. But inside Pastor Femi's heart, there was a struggle he had been hiding for years. He liked men. He prayed about it, fasted, and shouted to God every night, begging, "Father, please, take these feelings away." But the feelings did not leave him. He tried to focus on his work as a pastor. "I will serve God," he told himself. "Nobody must ever know." But the feelings were always there, like a shadow he couldn't shake. One Sunday, after a powerful sermon about avoiding temptation, something strange happened. A young man named Kunle, one of the church ushers, bent over near the altar to pick up a Bible someone had dropped. Pastor Femi's heart started beating fast. He clenched his fist and closed his eyes, trying to fight the thoughts in his mind. "Pastor, are you are you okay?" Brother Kunle asked, noticing that the pastor was staring at him. Yes, I'm fine, I'm fine," Pastor Kunle said quickly, wiping the sweat from his forehead. But from that day, everything had changed. Anytime a young man bent over in church to pick up a chair, to clean the floor, or even to tie their shoe, Pastor Femi couldn't control himself. He would get angry, shout at them, and even send them away. "Ah, why is Pastor always shouting at the boys?" one woman whispered to her friend. "I don't know," her friend replied. "But you know these pastors, they can see things that we can't. Maybe they are seeing something that we don't know." Soon, the young men in the church started avoiding Pastor Femi. They stopped bending down for anything and always stayed far away from him during service. But the pastor's behavior only became worse. One day, during choir practice, another young man named Chinedu was arranging the microphone. As Chinedu bent down to adjust the cables, Pastor Femi suddenly stormed in. "Stop that!" he shouted, his voice shaking. Everyone turned to look. "Eh? Pastor, what happened now?" Chinedu asked, confused. "Don't bend down in this church again!" Pastor Femi barked, his face red, and he looked like he was about to burst. Chinedu slowly stood up, scratching his head. "Uh, okay, Pastor. I'm sorry." The choir members exchanged puzzled glances. "Why is Pastor behaving like this?" one of them whispered. But the whispers in the church grew louder. Some members began to suspect that something was wrong. Mama Tolu noticed her husband's strange behavior too. One night, after the children had gone to bed, she confronted him. "Femi," she said softly, "what is going on with you, my love? Why are you always angry with the young men in church?" Pastor Femi avoided her eyes. Nothing is going on, Tolu. Just leave it." But Mama Tolu wasn't satisfied. "Femi, I'm your wife now. If something is bothering you, tell me." Pastor Femi stood up, pacing the room. He wanted to tell her the truth, but he was afraid. What would she think? What would the church think? His secret was like a stone heavy on his heart, and it was getting harder to carry. Pastor Femi's struggle with his desires became harder to control. No matter how much he prayed or fasted, the feelings didn't go away. He kept telling himself, I'm a man of God. I cannot fall into sin. But his heart was restless, and soon he started giving in to his thoughts. It began with Kunle, the young usher. Pastor Femi called him into his office one evening after choir practice. Brother Kunle, he said, putting on his warmest smile. I've been watching you. You're a very hard-working and faithful young man. God will bless you for all you do in this church. Kunle felt proud. Thank you, Pastor. But, Pastor Femi continued, his voice dropping, I sense that you are struggling with something. Are you? You can tell me. I'm your pastor. Kunle's smile faded. He didn't know what to say. No, Pastor. I'm fine. Pastor Femi leaned closer, his tone soft and caring. Don't lie to me, Kunle. I see things in the spirit. God has shown me that you are carrying a heavy burden. Kunle hesitated. He didn't want to offend the pastor, so he nodded slowly. Maybe a little, sir. That's what I thought, Pastor Femi said, his voice now gentle, almost fatherly. Come, let me pray for you. He stood up, placed his hands on Kunle's shoulder, and began to pray. But as the prayer went on, his hands started lingering in places they shouldn't. Kunle froze, unsure of what was happening. Pastor? Kunle said softly, his voice shaking. Shh! Pastor Femi whispered. This is part of deliverance. Don't fight it. Kunle didn't know what to do. He was too afraid to push the pastor away. After all, this was a man of God, someone everyone in the church respected. He felt trapped, unsure of how to escape. That night was the beginning of something dark. Pastor Femi began targeting other young men in the church, always choosing the ones who seemed shy or unsure of themselves. He used his power and position to manipulate them, telling them that he was helping them grow closer to God. You must never tell anyone about this, he would say after each encounter. It's between you, me, and the Lord. If people find out, they won't understand. They'll think you are unholy. The boys believed him. They were scared of what might happen if they spoke out. Pastor Femi was respected by everyone. Who would believe them over him? Over time, the pastor's behavior became more reckless. He started calling boys to his office during odd hours and finding excuses to keep them late after church events. Some of the older women in the church began to notice. Why is Pastor spending so much time with the young men? One woman asked her friend after service. Maybe he's mentoring them, her friend replied. Pastor is a good man. Don't think anything about it. He's just helping the boys. But not everyone was convinced. Mama Tolu, Pastor Femi's wife, started to feel uneasy. She noticed that her husband was spending less time at home and more time counseling young men. She also noticed that some of the boys avoided her whenever she greeted them. Something is not right, she thought to herself. One night when Pastor Femi came home late, she confronted him again. Femi, this is not normal. What is going on with you and those boys? Tolu, I told you to leave the matter alone, he snapped. But I'm your wife, she shouted. I can't just sit here and pretend nothing is happening. Pastor Femi stared at her, his face full of anger. If you trust me as your husband, and as a man of God, you will stop asking me nonsense questions. But secrets can only stay hidden for so long. One of the boys, Chinedu, couldn't take it anymore. He started acting out at home, refusing to eat and staying locked in his room for hours. His mother, a devoted member of Fire of Glory Ministries, grew worried. Chinedu, what's wrong? She asked one evening. You've been so quiet lately. Did something happen at school? Chinedu shook his head. No, Mama. Then what is it? She pressed. You know you can tell me anything. You're my baby, my boy. Tears filled Chinedu's eyes. He wanted to tell her, but he was afraid. What if she didn't believe him? What if she got angry? Mama, he began, his voice trembling. It's Pastor Femi. Chinedu took a deep breath as tears streamed down his face. His mother, Mama Nkechi, sat on the edge of the bed, her brows furrowed with worry. What about Pastor Femi, my son? She asked gently, placing a hand on his shoulder. Did he pray for you? Did something happen? Chinedu hesitated, his chest tightening with fear. Mama, Pastor Femi, he... His voice broke as he looked down at his trembling hands. He did something bad to me. Mama Nkechi's face shifted to confusion. What are you saying? Pastor Femi is a man of God. He can't do bad things. Chinedu wiped his tears and looked up at her, his voice now firm despite the fear. He touched me, Mama. He said it was a part of prayer, but it wasn't. It was wrong. He's been doing this to others too. For a moment, silence filled the room. Mama Nkechi stared at her son as if he'd just spoken a language she didn't understand. Then her expression hardened. Chinedu, stop this nonsense right now, she snapped, rising to her feet. But Mama, don't but Mama me. Do you know what you're saying? This boy. Do you know how much shame you'll bring to this family if you spread such lies? Chinedu's heart sank. Mama, I'm not lying. She cut him off, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. You've been spending too much time with those useless, unserious boys in the neighborhood. They've corrupted your mind with foolishness, Abi. Mama, I'm telling you the truth, he pleaded. Pastor Femi, enough! She snared, her voice echoing through the house. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. You must have a lying spirit in you. Yes, that's the only explanation. Mama, please, Chinedu whispered, his voice breaking. But Mama Nkechi had already made up her mind. She grabbed her headscarf from the chair and tied it tightly around her head. We are going to see Pastor Femi right now, she declared, pulling Chinedu to his feet. No, Mama, please, Chinedu begged, struggling against her grip. He'll hurt me again. Keep quiet, she snapped, dragging him out of the room. You need deliverance. You need deliverance, my son. The devil has filled your heart with lies, and only Pastor can cast him out. By the time they arrived at the church, it was dark, and the sanctuary was quiet. Pastor Femi was in his office preparing his notes for Sunday's sermon. When Mama Nkechi knocked on the door, he looked up, startled. Sister Nkechi, he said, opening the door. What brings you here at this hour? Pastor, I need your help, Mama Nkechi said, her voice trembling. The devil has entered my son. He's saying terrible things about you, lies that I know are not true. Pastor Femi's face tightened for a split second before he quickly replaced it with a calm, concerned expression. Come in, Sister Nkechi, let's talk. He led them into his office and gestured to them to sit. Mama Nkechi pushed Chinedu forward. Oya now, tell Pastor what you told me, she ordered. Chinedu shook his head, tears streaming down his face. Mama, please, don't make me do this. Speak, she barked. Chinedu looked up at Pastor Femi, whose eyes were now fixed on him, calm yet calculating. He knew he had to choose his words carefully. I, Chinedu stammered. I, I feel uncomfortable, Pastor. That's all. Mama Nkechi frowned. Ha! That's not what you said at home, oh. Pastor Femi smiled gently, his voice soothing. Sister Nkechi, leave the boy. Don't worry. The devil often sows confusion in young minds. Let me pray for him. No, Pastor, Chinedu cried, stepping back. Please, don't touch me. Mama Nkechi slapped him on his arm. Behave yourself, Chinedu. Pastor is trying to help you. Pastor Femi chuckled softly, his smile never faltering. It's okay, Sister Nkechi, it's okay. These things take time. Let's start with a simple prayer. He approached Chinedu, who was trembling with fear, and placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Lord, we come before you to bind the spirit of lies and rebellion in this young man, he began. Chinedu flinched at the touch, his heart racing. He wanted to scream, to run, but his mother's stern gaze kept him rooted to the spot. As the prayer went on, Mama Nkechi closed her eyes and whispered, Amen, after each line. But Chinedu couldn't ignore the tight grip of the pastor's hand on his shoulder. He felt trapped, his mind racing with thoughts of escape. Little did they know, someone was watching from the shadows. Deacon Ade, who had been locking up the church, had overheard the commotion and peered through the slightly ajar door. His eyes narrowed as he observed the scene before him. Something wasn't right. Deacon Ade lingered in the shadows, his heart heavy as he watched Pastor Femi's hard grip on Chinedu's shoulder. He had always admired Pastor Femi, but something about the boy's frightened expression stirred a deep unease in him. The deacon waited until Mama Nkechi and her son had left the office and the church grounds. Later that night, as Chinedu walked home beside his mother, Deacon Ade approached them from the side street. Sister Nkechi, good evening, oh, he said, forcing a warm smile. I couldn't help but notice you are at the church late tonight, eh? Is everything okay? Mama Nkechi sighed, shaking her head. Good evening, Deacon. This boy has been saying strange things. I just had to take him to the pastor for prayers. Chinedu avoided the deacon's gaze, clutching the hem of his shirt nervously. Strange things? Deacon Ade asked, keeping his tone casual. Children of these days, Mama Nkechi said, waving her hand dismissively. He claimed... She hesitated. He claimed Pastor Femi was misbehaving. Imagine, such lies. I told him he needed deliverance and Pastor agreed. Deacon Ade's eyes flicked to Chinedu, whose head hung low. He said thoughtfully. May I speak to Chinedu for a moment, Sister Nkechi? Perhaps hearing from another elder might help him to understand the seriousness of his words. Mama Nkechi hesitated. Well, if you think he can help, Deacon. But I warn you, this boy is very stubborn. Deacon Ade nodded. I'll be gentle, sister. Why don't you go ahead? I'll walk him home afterward. With a final warning glance at her son, Mama Nkechi reluctantly left. Once she was out of earshot, Deacon Ade turned to Chinedu and crouched slightly to meet his level. Chinedu, he said softly, what you said earlier, is it true? Tears welled up in Chinedu's eyes. It is, sir. But no one will believe me. Deacon Ade sighed deeply, his suspicion confirmed. You can trust me, my boy. Look, tell me everything, I promise. I won't let anyone hurt you? Chinedu hesitated, but something in the deacon's kind eyes gave him the courage to speak. Well, it started months ago, he whispered. Pastor called me into his office and said he wanted to pray for me. But then he touched me and it didn't feel like prayer. Oh. Deacon Ade's face hardened, but he kept his voice calm. You're not the only one, are you? Chenedo shook his head. No, sir. I've heard others talk, but they're too scared to say anything. The deacon straightened up, placing a comforting hand on the boy's shoulder. Chinedu, I need you to help me. If there are others, we need to find them and make sure this stops. Can you do that? Chinedu hesitated but nodded. Yes, sir, I will try. Over the next few days, Deacon Ade quietly reached out to some of the young men in the church. He spoke to them individually, creating a safe space for them to share their stories. One by one, they began to open up. There was a time Pastor asked me to stay back after choir practice, said Emeka, a shy teenager. He said he wanted to mentor me, but then he started touching me. Pastor, yes, so Pastor told me it was our secret, added Kelechi, a young usher. He said it was to test my faith. The deacon's heart grew heavier with each confession. It became clear that Pastor Femi had manipulated many of the boys, using his position of power to silence them. But Chinedu, now emboldened by the deacon's support, suggested something that took the deacon by surprise. We should all confront him together, he said firmly. He can't deny it if we are all there. Deacon Ade hesitated. That's a brave idea, Chinedu. But we need to be careful, oh. Pastor Femi has a lot of influence. If we don't handle this thing the right way, it could backfire. What should we do then? Kelechi asked, his voice trembling. Deacon Ade thought for a moment before speaking. We'll need proof. And once we have it, we will take it to the elders and to the authorities. This must end, but we have to protect ourselves too. The group began to quietly gather evidence, determined to expose the truth. They knew the road ahead would be difficult, but with each other's support and Deacon Ade's guidance, they felt a glimmer of hope. Pastor Femi's wife, Mama Tolu, had always been an observant woman. Over the years, she had learned to keep quiet about her husband's quirks and whispers she overheard in their congregation. But lately, his behavior had been harder to ignore. There were the late-night meetings with the young boys in the church. Then there was Deacon Ade, who had also started meeting with the same boys in secret. Mama Tolu couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. One evening, as Pastor Femi left for one of his supposed prayer sessions, Mama Tolu's suspicion boiled over. She paced the living room, her thoughts racing. This is no coincidence, she muttered to herself. The boys, the deacon. Something is happening, and I'm going to find out what that thing is. The next day, Mama Tolu quietly followed Deacon Ade after church service. She kept her distance, slipping behind walls and blending into the flow of people leaving the grounds. The deacon seemed unaware of her presence as he walked to a quiet corner of the compound where Chinedu and 3 other boys were waiting. Mama Tolu crouched behind a row of hedges, straining her ears to hear the conversation. You are all very brave for coming forward, Deacon Ade was saying. But we need to be very careful, oh. Mama Tolu must not know anything about this, not yet. She might warn Pastor Femi. After all, he's her husband now. Who knows if she's aware of what has been going on? Mama Tolu's heart sank, confusion swirling in her chest. Warn him? About what? Deacon, Chinedu said, his voice trembling but firm. I'm scared. What if people blame us? What if they say we wanted it? They won't, the deacon said firmly. We will make sure everyone knows the truth. Pastor Femi abused his power, and no one will get away with hurting you anymore. Mama Tolu's breath caught in her throat. The world seemed to tilt beneath her as the realization hit her. Abuse? My husband? She felt sick to her stomach, but forced herself to keep listening. Another boy, Emeka, spoke up. What if the elders don't believe us? They'll say we are lying, just like Chinedu's mom did. Deacon Ade's voice softened. That's why we are gathering proof. Once we have enough, they won't be able to deny it. We'll make sure Pastor Femi is held accountable. Mama Tolu stumbled away from the scene, her mind racing. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. Pastor Femi, her husband, the man she had trusted and supported for years, had been preying on the boys in the church? For a moment, she considered confronting him directly, but she quickly realized that wouldn't work. He was too cunning, too good at twisting the truth. If she wasn't careful, he'd turn the entire church against her. No, she thought, clenching her fist. I won't let him get away with this. Not after everything I've sacrificed for him. That night, Mama Tolu waited until her husband was fast asleep before slipping out of bed. She made her way to the deacon's house, knocking softly on the door. Deacon Ade opened it cautiously, his expression wary until he saw who it was. Mama Tolu, he said in surprise. What are you doing here? I know, she said quietly. I overheard your meeting with the boys. The deacon stiffened. Mama, She raised a hand to stop him. Don't worry. I'm not here to defend him. I want to help. The deacon's eyes widened. You believe us? Tears welled up in Mama Tolu's eyes. I didn't want to. But after what I heard, I can't ignore it anymore. He betrayed me. He betrayed all of us. Listen, tell me, what can I do to make this right? Over the next few weeks, Mama Tolu worked with the deacon and the boys to gather more evidence. She used her position as Pastor Femi's wife to access his office and personal records, uncovering shocking proof of his misconduct. But the closer they got to the truth, the more dangerous their mission became. Pastor Femi was starting to suspect that something was amiss, and Mama Tolu knew it was only a matter of time before he tried to silence them all. Pastor Femi stopped summoning the boys to his office out of suspicion that something may be going on. The group knew their window of opportunity was closing, but they still needed undeniable proof to expose Pastor Femi. Something so concrete that no one, not even the elders who revered him, could deny it. Mama Tolu, the deacon, and the boys devised a plan. It was risky, but it was their best chance to catch him red-handed. They decided to enlist Toby, an openly gay teenager from a neighboring community. He had faced ridicule for his identity, but agreed to help them because he heard about the terrible things that had been happening to the young men in the church. Toby's role was to act as bait, pretending to seek deliverance for his sinful desires. His fake mother, a member of Deacon Ade's extended family, would accompany him, presenting the situation to the pastor as a desperate plea for salvation. They knew this would be a situation the pastor couldn't resist. On Sunday morning, the trap was set. Toby arrived with the woman, who played the part of his distressed mother perfectly. Her voice trembled with emotion as she begged Pastor Femi to help her son. Pastor, she said, wringing her hands, I've heard of the great work you've done with the boys in the church. Help my son. My son needs deliverance, please, I beg. Pastor Femi's eye gleamed with interest. He placed a comforting hand on the woman's shoulder, his tone laced with false sympathy. Don't worry, my sister. God's power works through me. Your son will be set free. He led them to his office and told the woman to wait outside. This is a spiritual matter, he said. It is best handled in private. Unbeknownst to Pastor Femi, tiny cameras had already been placed in the office the night before, hidden in inconspicuous corners. Mama Tolu, Deacon Ade, and the boys were watching everything unfold from a nearby room, their hearts pounding. Inside the office, Pastor Femi began his usual routine, prayers laced with manipulative words. He approached Toby, placing his hands on the boy's shoulder. Deliverance requires closeness, the pastor said, his voice low and predatory. He started to guide Toby towards the couch, but Toby, following the plan, suddenly stiffened. Pastor, I'm scared, he said, his voice trembling just enough to sound genuine. Don't be afraid, Pastor Femi whispered, his mask slipping as he leaned in closer. And that was when it happened. His intentions became unmistakable. The cameras caught every word, every action, every damning moment. The door burst open. Deacon Ade, Mama Tolu, the boys stormed in, armed with their phones to capture additional footage. What is the meaning of this? Pastor Femi shouted, his face red with rage and panic. You tell us, Pastor! Mama Tolu's voice cut through the room like a blade. This is what you've been doing to the boys, eh? Isn't it? Using your position to prey on them. The pastor's face paled as he realized the extent of their trap. He tried to defend himself, stumbling over his words. This is a misunderstanding now. The devil is trying to ruin my ministry. But it was too late. The live streaming video broadcast to key members of the church and community ensured that the truth could not be silenced. The fallout was swift and devastating. The elders called an emergency meeting, and the congregation demanded justice for the boys. Pastor Femi was stripped of his position and handed over to the authorities. The young men he had preyed upon were finally heard and supported. Counseling and support groups were established to help them heal. Mama Tolu, though heartbroken by her husband's betrayal, felt a sense of relief knowing that justice had been served. But the story didn't end there. As Pastor Femi sat in a dimly lit cell, his thoughts turned to his own past. Memories of his childhood resurfaced, his father's cruelty, the shame he had buried deep inside, and the secrets that had shaped his twisted path. The truth about how he became the man he was would soon come to light. Thank you guys for watching the story. Let's meet in the comments section down below. Do you think what happened to Pastor Femi was fair? Do you think they should have went about it a different way? Do you think he should have handled things differently when his urges became unbearable? Let's meet in the comments section and discuss as we wait for part 2 of this story, where we delve deeper into Pastor Femi and how he ended up this way. Love you guys. Thank you so much. Please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing tales. Love you.